Welcome to 1031 University. I'm Paul Holloway. Today's topic is going to be related party 1031 exchanges. Is it possible to exchange real estate amongst related parties? And it really depends on the situation. What I would like to do today is just go over a little bit about what the IRS's concern is with related party exchanges, followed up by an example of how somebody could be taking advantage of the IRS in a basis shifting scheme, and then let you know situations where related party exchanges do work and situations where they are most definitely frowned upon by the IRS. So in order to tackle this, I wanted to give you the section of the tax code, which is 1031F of the code, where the IRS goes into detail discussing related party exchanges, defining who is a related party. For simplicity, we're talking family members like mom, dad, brother, sister, anybody bloodline related. Those would be related parties, or entities of which you have more than a 50% interest in. That would also be considered to be related. But if you need to go into more detail with what you're attempting to do, you could look at these two sections of the code. And then finally, guidance for anybody who is wondering if this ruling affects them. Revenue Ruling 2002-83, that is something to look up and go over with your tax advisor and decide as to whether or not this may affect your 1031 exchange. But long and short, what's going on is we have had in the past situations where family members, for example, may try and swap two pieces of real estate. Dad takes son's real estate and son takes dad's real estate. And then at some point, one of the parties decides to resell a property immediately or shortly thereafter and trying to avoid paying a higher tax. And if I may just do a quick example on the board. So let's say father's property is valued at $200,000 and has a very low basis. In other words, we'll just say $20,000. So there's $180,000 of built-in gain on this property. Now, son has a property that's also valued at $200,000, but this one has a higher basis, a much higher basis at $180,000. So son's property only has $20,000 of built-in gain on this property. So what if father and son swap properties to where father takes over son's property at $200,000 and son takes over dad's property at $200,000. Well, at the end of the day, they did swap equal value real estate, but typically with any 1031 exchange, once the exchange is complete, you end up taking over the basis on the property that you had. So if the goal all along was for father to sell this property with $180,000 of built-in gain, but he decides to swap it with son, well, this property, now that it is with son takes it over at the $180,000 basis. Therefore, it would only have a $20,000 built-in gain. And if son immediately sells that property to somebody else, he would only have to pay a very small amount of tax. Which in reality, if father sold that initially to somebody else, there would have been a much higher tax due on that property. So what the IRS did in putting this section into the code, they tried to limit or not allow somebody to do this swap of properties and then actually resell it quickly. One of the provisions of this section of the code is that there is a 2-year holding period on any related party exchange involving a swap of properties. So what the IRS says is if both parties swap these pieces of real estate and then hold on to the real estate for at least 2 years, then they do not believe it is a basis shifting scheme that is going on. So it would be required on a swap to hold on to the real estate for at least 2 years. There are some exclusions or exemptions, like a death of a family member, that you may be able to have shorter than a 2-year hold. But generally speaking, you do have to do a 2-year hold on that swap. Now let's change the facts a little bit to where what we would typically see a little bit more of today. And that is a situation where, is it possible for Bob to sell a piece of real estate to Mark and start a 1031 delayed exchange, not a swap, but Bob is selling to Mark, and then Bob ends up buying a piece of real estate from Mary? So let's play with the facts a little bit here. If it's a forward 1031 exchange, Bob selling to Mark, and let's say Mark is Bob's son, then that is a perfectly good 1031 exchange. There isn't even a 2-year holding period on that transaction. The proceeds can then be put with a qualified intermediary and then ultimately used to buy the replacement property from a non-related third party, Mary. So that is a good 1031 exchange. The problem with the delayed exchange is if Mary is related to Bob. So if Bob sells the real estate to Mark, who is not related to Bob, to start the exchange, but then Bob wants to complete the exchange buying from Mary, say Mary is Bob's sister, that is problematic under 1031, because if you have a basis shifting situation going on where you may have a much lower tax to pay or no tax to pay, then the IRS is going to rule against that. And this revenue ruling 2002-83 tends to cause most related party exchanges on the replacement property to not be valid or be very risky at best. So this is something to always go over with your tax advisor and make sure that this revenue ruling does or does not apply to you. But in most cases, not a good idea to complete a 1031 exchange buying a replacement property from a related party. Again, there is an exemption or two that you may be able to rely on. For example, if Mary in turn does her own 1031 exchange and isn't cashing out, then Mary may be able to assist Bob in selling her property to him as long as she's doing her own 1031 exchange. But generally speaking, not a good idea to complete a 1031 with a related party. So this has been 1031 University. If you like this video, we have other videos on our YouTube website. Please subscribe to our channel. And if you would like to see a more detailed blog post or two, you can visit accruit.com. And our in-house counsel has written a couple pieces on the related party issues. Thank you so much.